The arrogant officer thought he could humiliate another black driver. But when he pulled out his police chief badge, the officer stumbled backwards. Marcus Thompson's fingers drummed against the steering wheel of his black Audi A6 as he waited for the traffic light to turn green. The sun was setting, painting the suburban streets of St. Miss in shades of orange and purple. His shoulders felt heavy after 12 straight hours at the department, but the day wasn't quite done yet. No, listen, Janet, he spoke into his car's Bluetooth system. I need those diversity training reports on my desk first thing tomorrow morning. The mayor's office is breathing down my neck about this. Yes, Chief Thompson, his assistant's voice crackled through the speakers. I'll have them ready by 8. Make it 7:30. I've got that press conference about the new community outreach program. Marcus ended the call and let out a long breath. Being the head of the police department meant his work never really stopped. The street lights were starting to flicker on as he turned onto Maple Drive, the familiar route home he'd taken for the past 15 years. His phone buzzed again. The display showed his wife's smiling face. Hey, baby, he answered, keeping his eyes on the road. I'm about 20 minutes out. You're late again. Sarah's voice carried a mix of understanding and mild disappointment. Your dinner's getting cold. I know. The budget meeting ran long. These old-timers still don't understand why we need to allocate funds for de-escalation training. Well, hurry home. Tommy's got his science project to show you. Marcus smiled, thinking about his 12-year-old son. Tell him I'm. Red and blue lights suddenly flashed in his rearview mirror, cutting through the evening darkness. Honey, I'll call you back, Marcus said, ending the call before his wife could respond. He checked his speedometer, 32 in a 35 zone. His registration was current, lights were working, and he hadn't made any traffic violations. 23 years on the force had taught him exactly what this was. Marcus pulled over smoothly, positioning his car close to the curb. He kept both hands visible on the steering wheel, his gold wedding ring catching the last rays of sunlight. In the rearview mirror, he watched a young officer step out of the patrol car, hand resting casually on his holstered weapon. The beam of a flashlight cut through Marcus's car, sweeping across the interior. Heavy boots crunched on gravel, approaching the driver's side window. Marcus didn't turn his head. He kept his gaze forward, maintaining his calm despite the familiar knot forming in his stomach. License and registration, the officer demanded without preamble, his tone sharp and authoritative. Marcus glanced at the nameplate visible in the beam of the flashlight. Brady. Good evening, officer, Marcus replied evenly. May I ask why I'm being pulled over? License and registration first, Brady repeated, his voice harder. Then we can discuss why you're being stopped. Marcus noticed the officer's hand hadn't left his weapon. Officer Brady, I'm going to reach for my wallet now. It's in my back pocket. Slowly, Brady barked. Keep your other hand where I can see it. Marcus moved with deliberate care, pulling out his wallet. His department ID was right there, tucked behind his driver's license, but he hesitated. Years of experience had taught him that sometimes, revealing rank too early could make a situation worse. He handed over his license and reached for the glove compartment. I'm getting my registration now. What's the hurry? Brady's tone was mocking. Got somewhere important to be. Marcus kept his voice steady. My dinner's getting cold, officer. And my son's waiting to show me his science project. Brady scoffed, shining the flashlight directly in Marcus's face. Yeah, sure. Like I haven't heard that one before. Marcus squinted against the harsh light but maintained his composure. The weight of his badge felt heavy in his jacket pocket, but he held back. Sometimes, these moments needed to play out. This vehicle was reported matching the description of one involved in a suspicious activity call, Brady said, though Marcus knew that was a lie. He'd been heading the department long enough to know when an officer was fishing. What suspicious activity would that be? Marcus asked calmly. Sir, I'll ask the questions here. Brady's voice carried that edge Marcus had heard too many times before. That mix of authority and something darker. Step out of the vehicle. Marcus's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. Officer Brady, I don't believe that's necessary. I provided my license and registration, and I've been cooperative. Sir, when an officer gives you an order, you comply. Brady's hand gripped his holster more firmly. Now step out of the vehicle before we have a problem. Through his side mirror, Marcus could see neighbors starting to gather on their porches. Some had their phones out, recording. In all his years of service, in all his work to reform the department, moments like these still happened. They still stung. "All right, Officer Brady," Marcus said, his hand moving to the door handle. "I'm stepping out, but I want you to know that I'm recording this interaction as well." Brady's face hardened. "Recording won't help you if you don't comply, sir." Marcus opened his door slowly, emerging into the cooling evening air. The neighbors watched from their yards, their presence both a comfort and a reminder of how public this humiliation was. But Marcus Thompson hadn't become the head of the police department by letting his emotions rule him. "Face the vehicle, hands where I can see them," Brady ordered, his voice carrying across the quiet street. Marcus complied, feeling the familiar mix of anger and resignation. His suit jacket, the one Sarah had given him for their anniversary, pressed against the cool metal of his car. The badge in his pocket seemed to burn against his chest. "Officer Brady," Marcus started again, his voice carrying the weight of his position, though Brady didn't know it yet. "I believe we can handle this situation more professionally." "Spread your legs," Brady commanded, ignoring Marcus's words. "You know the drill. I'm sure you've been through this before." The implied meaning wasn't lost on Marcus. Neither was the snicker in Brady's voice. Down the street, more cars were slowing, more phones recording. This moment was bigger than just him now. A second patrol car's lights appeared in the distance, responding to what was likely a routine traffic stop backup call. Marcus knew he should end this now, pull out his badge and watch the color drain from Brady's face. But something held him back. Maybe it was years of training officers, of trying to create teachable moments. Or maybe it was the weight of responsibility he carried, not just as a police chief, but as a black man in his position. "Sir, got anything in your pockets I should know about?" Brady's tone dripped with insinuation. Marcus took a deep breath. The moment to reveal his identity was coming, but not quite yet. Sometimes, the hardest lessons were the ones you had to let play out. "Officer," he said clearly, knowing the growing number of phone cameras would pick up every word, "I want to be very clear about something." Brady stepped closer, his presence meant to intimidate. "Only thing I want clear is you following my orders. Now, what's in your pockets?" The sun had fully set now, leaving them in the artificial glow of street lights and emergency flashes. Marcus could feel the tension building, the moment approaching its inevitable climax. In his pocket, his chief's badge waited, ready to transform this encounter in an instant. But for now, Marcus Thompson, head of the St. Miss Police Department, stood facing his own car, hands visible, letting a young officer with unconscious bias dig himself deeper into a hole that would become a lesson he'd never forget. The night was young, and this last stop of the day was far from over. "I said, what's in your pockets?" Officer Brady's voice cut through the evening air, sharp and demanding. Marcus kept his hands visible against the cool metal of his car. "My wallet, which you've already seen. My phone. And my police credentials." "Police credentials?" Brady's laugh was harsh. "Right. And I'm the Tooth Fairy. Empty them." Slowly, a car drove past, slowing down to watch the scene. Marcus could hear the murmurs of the growing crowd of neighbors. Someone whispered, "They're doing it again." "Listen carefully, Officer Brady," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "Before this goes any further." "No, you listen," Brady cut him off, stepping closer. "I'm getting real tired of your attitude. Empty those pockets now, or we're going to have a serious problem." Marcus felt the young officer's presence behind him, too close for proper protocol. Through years of training other officers, he knew Brady was deliberately invading his personal space, a tactic meant to provoke a reaction. "Getting nervous?" Brady taunted. "Usually you people talk a lot more than this." The racial undertone hung in the air like smoke. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, remembering his first days on the force, back in '99. His training officer, an old white man named Jenkins, had pulled him aside after their first shift. "Listen, son," Jenkins had said, "this job's gonna show you the worst in people, including other cops. Your badge doesn't change the color of your skin to them." "Chief Thompson," a familiar voice called from the growing crowd. Marcus recognized Officer Martinez, who wasn't on duty but lived in the neighborhood. She started moving forward, recognition clear on her face. "Stay back," Brady shouted, his hand moving to his weapon again. "This is an active traffic stop." Marcus opened his mouth to acknowledge Martinez, But Brady's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you move. Don't you say a word." The young officer's authority was crumbling, replaced by something more desperate. "Face the vehicle." More patrol cars were arriving now, their lights painting the street in alternating red and blue. Marcus could hear the crackling of radios, the shuffle of feet, the whispered conversations of gathering officers. "Now empty those pockets," Brady demanded again. "Real slow." Marcus began to comply, his movements deliberate. "Officer Brady, your body camera is on, correct? What's it to you?" "Just making sure everything's being recorded properly." Marcus kept his voice professional, educational even. "Department policy requires all traffic stops to be recorded. Section 4.3 of the..." "Oh, so now you're an expert on department policy." Brady's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Let me guess, you learned that in your extensive law enforcement career." Marcus almost smiled. "You could say that." His phone buzzed in his pocket, probably Sarah wondering why he'd hung up so abruptly. Or maybe it was the department, alerted by Martinez to the situation unfolding. Either way, it could wait. "Phone," Marcus announced clearly, placing it on the hood of his car. "Wallet's already been inspected by you." Brady's flashlight beam followed his movements. "What else?" Marcus's fingers touched his badge, the metal warm from being pressed against his body. 23 years of service, from beat cop to department head, condensed into a single piece of polished metal. "I have one more item, Officer Brady," Marcus said, his tone shifting subtly. "But before I show it to you, I want you to think carefully about everything that's happened in the last 10 minutes. Is that a threat?" Brady's voice rose, carrying across the street to the dozens of phones now recording. Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, officer. It's an opportunity for learning. Last warning." Brady's voice cracked slightly. "Show me what's in your pocket. Now." The crowd had grown larger. Marcus could see Martinez talking urgently into her phone, probably calling the precinct. Other officers on scene were starting to pick up on the tension, moving closer but unsure of what was happening. "Officer Brady," Marcus began again, "how long have you been with the department?" "Shut up and empty your pocket." 2 years, if I remember correctly," Marcus continued calmly. "Graduated from the academy in spring 2022. Top quarter of your class, but some concerns noted about your interpersonal skills." Brady's swagger faltered for the first time. "How do you?" "Your psychological evaluation suggested a tendency toward authoritarian behavior under stress," Marcus went on. "We flagged you for additional supervision, but somehow that recommendation got lost in the system. My oversight, I suppose. One of many things I'm working to fix in the department." The flashlight beam wavered. "What are you talking about?" Marcus could hear the uncertainty creeping into Brady's voice. The moment was approaching, that pivot point where authority would shift and lessons would begin. "One last item in my pocket, Officer Brady," Marcus said, his hand moving slowly toward his jacket. "I want you to pay close attention to what happens next. Every officer should understand how quickly a situation can change. Don't move." Brady's shout was more desperate now, his composure cracking. "Hands where I can see them." But Marcus continued his slow, deliberate movement. "I'm going to show you something that I believe will be very educational for your future in law enforcement. That is, if you still have a future in law enforcement after tonight." The gathered crowd had fallen silent. Even the radio chatter from the patrol cars seemed muted. The entire street held its breath, waiting. "Last chance." Brady's voice had risen an octave. "Hands up, or what? Officer Brady." Marcus's voice carried the weight of his position now, filling the space between them. "Are you going to shoot the head of the police department for following your improper orders too slowly?" His fingers closed around his badge, the familiar shape a reminder of everything he'd worked for, everything he'd tried to change. In moments, he would turn around, and Officer Brady's world would tilt on its axis. But first, let him stew in those words for just a moment longer. The silence stretched, broken only by the soft whir of phone cameras and the distant sound of more sirens approaching. Brady's breathing had become audible, quick and shallow. Marcus almost felt sorry for what was about to happen to the young officer. Almost. The badge felt heavy in his hand as he began to turn, ready to face the officer who was about to learn the hardest lesson of his career. The night air crackled with tension, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, nature's own commentary on the drama unfolding on this quiet suburban street. Officer Brady's flashlight beam trembled slightly, and Marcus knew that in the young officer's mind, the pieces were finally starting to fall into place. Too late to prevent what was coming, but just in time to understand the magnitude of his mistake. I said, "What's in your pockets?" Officer Brady's voice cut through the evening air, sharp and demanding. Marcus kept his hands visible against the cool metal of his car. "My wallet, which you've already seen. My phone. And my police credentials." "Police credentials?" Brady's laugh was harsh. "Right. And I'm the Tooth Fairy. Empty them." Slowly, a car drove past, slowing down to watch the scene. Marcus could hear the murmurs of the growing crowd of neighbors. Someone whispered, "They're doing it again." "Listen carefully, Officer Brady," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the anger building in his chest. "Before this goes any further." "No, you listen," Brady cut him off, stepping closer. "I'm getting real tired of your attitude. Empty those pockets now, or we're going to have a serious problem." Marcus felt the young officer's presence behind him, too close for proper protocol. Through years of training other officers, he knew Brady was deliberately invading his personal space, a tactic meant to provoke a reaction. "Getting nervous?" Brady taunted. "Usually you people talk a lot more than this." The racial undertone hung in the air like smoke. Marcus closed his eyes for a moment, remembering his first days on the force, back in '99. His training officer, an old white man named Jenkins, had pulled him aside after their first shift. "Listen, son," Jenkins had said, "this job's gonna show you the worst in people, including other cops. Your badge doesn't change the color of your skin to them." "Chief Thompson," a familiar voice called from the growing crowd. Marcus recognized Officer Martinez, who wasn't on duty but lived in the neighborhood. She started moving forward, recognition clear on her face. "Stay back," Brady shouted, his hand moving to his weapon again. "This is an active traffic stop." Marcus opened his mouth to acknowledge Martinez, but Brady's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't you move. Don't you say a word." The young officer's authority was crumbling, replaced by something more desperate. "Face the vehicle." More patrol cars were arriving now, their lights painting the street in alternating red and blue. Marcus could hear the crackling of radios, the shuffle of feet, the whispered conversations of gathering officers. "Now empty those pockets," Brady demanded again. Real slow. Marcus began to comply, his movements deliberate. "Officer Brady, your body camera is on, correct?" "What's it to you?" "Just making sure everything's being recorded properly." Marcus kept his voice professional, educational even. "Department policy requires all traffic stops to be recorded. Section 4.3 of the..." "Oh, so now you're an expert on department policy." Brady's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Let me guess. You learned that in your extensive law enforcement career." Marcus almost smiled. "You could say that." His phone buzzed in his pocket. Probably Sarah wondering why he'd hung up so abruptly. Or maybe it was the department, alerted by Martinez to the situation unfolding. Either way, it could wait. "Phone," Marcus announced clearly, placing it on the hood of his car. "Wallet's already been inspected by you." Brady's flashlight beam followed his movements. "What else?" Marcus's fingers touched his badge, the metal warm from being pressed against his body. 23 years of service, from beat cop to department head, condensed into a single piece of polished metal. "I have one more item, Officer Brady," Marcus said, his tone shifting subtly. "But before I show it to you, I want you to think carefully about everything that's happened in the last 10 minutes. Is that a threat?" Brady's voice rose, carrying across the street to the dozens of phones now recording. Marcus shook his head slowly. "No, officer. It's an opportunity for learning. Last warning." Brady's voice cracked slightly. "Show me what's in your pocket. Now." The crowd had grown larger. Marcus could see Martinez talking urgently into her phone, probably calling the precinct. Other officers on scene were starting to pick up on the tension, moving closer but unsure of what was happening. "Officer Brady," Marcus began again. "How long have you been with the department?" "Shut up and empty your pocket." 2 years, if I remember correctly, Marcus continued calmly. "Graduated from the academy in spring 2022. Top quarter of your class. But some concerns noted about your interpersonal skills." Brady's swagger faltered for the first time. "How do you?" "Your psychological evaluation suggested a tendency toward authoritarian behavior under stress," Marcus went on. We flagged you for additional supervision, but somehow that recommendation got lost in the system. My oversight, I suppose. One of many things I'm working to fix in the department. The flashlight beam wavered. What are you talking about? Marcus could hear the uncertainty creeping into Brady's voice. The moment was approaching, that pivot point where authority would shift and lessons would begin. One last item in my pocket, Officer Brady, Marcus said, his hand moving slowly toward his jacket. I want you to pay close attention to what happens next. Every officer should understand how quickly a situation can change. Don't move. Brady's shout was more desperate now, his composure cracking. Hands where I can see them. But Marcus continued his slow, deliberate movement. I'm going to show you something that I believe will be very educational for your future in law enforcement. That is, if you still have a future in law enforcement after tonight. The gathered crowd had fallen silent. Even the radio chatter from the patrol cars seemed muted. The entire street held its breath, waiting. Last chance. Brady's voice had risen an octave. Hands up. Or what? Officer Brady. Marcus's voice carried the weight of his position now, filling the space between them. Are you going to shoot the head of the police department for following your improper orders too slowly? His fingers closed around his badge, the familiar shape a reminder of everything he'd worked for, everything he'd tried to change. In moments, he would turn around, and Officer Brady's world would tilt on its axis. But first, let him stew in those words for just a moment longer. The silence stretched, broken only by the software of phone cameras and the distant sound of more sirens approaching. Brady's breathing had become audible, quick and shallow. Marcus almost felt sorry for what was about to happen to the young officer. Almost. The badge felt heavy in his hand as he began to turn, ready to face the officer who was about to learn the hardest lesson of his career. The night air crackled with tension, and somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled, nature's own commentary on the drama unfolding on this quiet suburban street. Officer Brady's flashlight beam trembled slightly, and Marcus knew that in the young officer's mind, the pieces were finally starting to fall into place. Too late to prevent what was coming, but just in time to understand the magnitude of his mistake. The flash of cameras lit up the night like lightning as Marcus guided his family back toward their car. Sarah's hand gripped his arm tight enough to wrinkle his suit jacket. Marcus, she whispered, this is going viral. It's already on Twitter. Dad, my project, Tommy said, holding up the crumpled display board. It's about systemic bias in artificial intelligence. Can I still show you? Marcus couldn't help but laugh at the irony. Yeah, son. Perfect timing. Chief Thompson. A reporter pushed forward, microphone extended. Channel 5 News. Can we get a statement about departmental racism? Marcus turned, keeping his family behind him. My office will issue a formal statement in the morning. Right now, I'm going home with my family. More questions flew at him from the press gaggle. Is this the first time you've been profiled by your own officers? Will there be protests? Are you planning to resign? His phone buzzed again, the mayor's office calling for the third time. He declined the call. Martinez, he called out to the off-duty officer who was still managing the scene. Make sure these people stay back from my vehicle. Yes, sir. She started organizing a perimeter with the remaining officers. As Marcus opened the car door for his family, Captain Rivera approached, his face grim. Chief, we've got a situation brewing. The police union rep is already making noise. Of course he is. Marcus checked his watch, 8:45 p.m. Tell Frank I'll meet with him first thing tomorrow. He's demanding to meet tonight. Says he's on his way to the station now. Marcus shut the car door after his family was inside. Then he can wait at the station until morning. I'm taking my son home to show me his science project. Rivera nodded, understanding in his eyes. Yes, sir. And Brady? What about him? He's not doing well. Keeps saying his dad's going to kill him. Apparently, his father's on the force too. Lieutenant Brady over in the 4th. Marcus rubbed his temples. Lieutenant James Brady, old guard, resistant to change. And now he knew why his son had those particular biases. Have Brady write his statement, Marcus said. Tell him not to leave anything out. Every assumption, every decision, every word. I want to know what was going through his head from the moment he spotted my car. And his father. We'll have to deal with it. We're not running this department based on family connections anymore. A small crowd of protesters was already forming at the end of the street, their hastily made signs visible in the news camera's lights. Defund racist police and who watches the watchman. Marcus's phone buzzed yet again. This time it was the Attorney General's office. "Sir," Rivera said, watching the crowd grow, "this is going to be a powder keg. Then we better make sure we handle it right." Marcus opened his car door. "I want Brady's body cam footage reviewed tonight. Get me a preliminary report by 0600. "Yes, sir." "And the press?" Marcus looked at the news vans now clogging the street. "Tell them I'll hold a press conference tomorrow at noon. Right now, I'm going home to be a father." He slid into the driver's seat, feeling the weight of his badge in his pocket. Sarah reached over and squeezed his hand. "You okay?" she asked softly. "Ask me tomorrow." He started the engine. "Tommy, tell me about your project while we drive." As they pulled away from the curb, Marcus caught sight of Brady in his rearview mirror, sitting in the back of a patrol car, head in his hands. The young officer looked up as they passed, their eyes meeting briefly in the mirror. Tommy's voice filled the car. "So, Dad, I was researching how AI systems can perpetuate human biases because they learn from biased data." Marcus smiled despite everything. His son had no idea how relevant his project had just become. Back at the station, the phones were ringing off the hook. Dispatch patched through the most urgent calls to Marcus's cell. "No, Governor," he said, as they turned onto their street. "I don't believe this requires state intervention." "Yes, I understand the optics." "No, I'm not planning to resign. Because running away won't solve the systemic issues." Their driveway was already occupied by news vans. "Back door," Sarah said immediately, reaching for her keys. They circled the block and parked in old Mrs. Johnson's garage. She'd given them a key years ago for emergencies. The back gate creaked as they slipped through, Tommy clutching his project board. Inside their kitchen, the familiar smell of Sarah's pot roast still lingered, though dinner was long cold. Marcus loosened his tie and sank into a chair while Sarah reheated plates in the microwave. "Okay, Tommy," he said, "show me what you've got." Tommy propped up his wrinkled display board on the kitchen counter. "So, I started by looking at facial recognition software." The doorbell rang. Then again, and again. "Ignore it," Sarah said firmly, putting a plate in front of Marcus. His phone lit up with a text from Rivera. Union rep threatening to call emergency meeting. "Brady Sr. demanding to speak with you." Marcus typed back, "Tomorrow." Another text, "Social media's exploding. Video's got 500K views already." Tommy was still presenting. "And that's why AI needs diverse training data, just like police need diverse training." Marcus looked at his son, really looked at him. 12 years old, brilliant, passionate about justice, and black in America. How many times would he face his own version of tonight's encounter? The doorbell rang again. "Marcus," Sarah said softly, "what are you going to do about Brady?" He took a bite of lukewarm pot roast, considering. "Depends on him, on whether he's ready to learn. And his father is part of the problem." Marcus pulled out his phone and started typing another text to Rivera. "Schedule mandatory bias training review for all command staff. Starting with LT. Brady." Tommy had finished his presentation and was looking at his father expectantly. "So what do you think, Dad? Did I explain the systemic bias part okay?" Marcus stood and hugged his son. "You did great, Tommy. And tomorrow, you're coming to work with me." "Really?" Tommy's eyes lit up. "Really? I want you to present this to someone. Someone who needs to understand exactly what you're talking about." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Brady?" Marcus nodded. "Sometimes the best teachers are the ones who never plan to teach." His phone buzzed again. The police union was threatening a vote of no confidence. The mayor wanted to know his plan for handling the media. The attorney general was concerned about civil rights implications. And somewhere in the city, a young officer named Brady was writing the most important report of his career. The doorbell rang once more insistent this time. "I'll go upstairs and finish my homework," Tommy said, reading the room. Once he was gone, Sarah turned to Marcus. "This could cost you everything you've worked for." "No," Marcus replied, pulling up the viral video of his traffic stop. "This is what I've been working for. A chance to make real change." He watched the video play out on his phone screen. Saw himself standing there, hands visible, Brady's voice sharp with unexamined prejudice. Saw the moment of revelation, the badge catching the light. Saw the crowd's reaction, the phone's recording, the truth being captured in real time. Tomorrow would be chaos. The press conference, the union meeting, the disciplinary hearing. Brady and his father, the mayor and the protesters, the whole city watching to see how he'd handle it. But tonight, he had a cold pot roast to finish and a son who just taught him something about systemic bias. His phone lit up again. Commissioner requesting urgent meeting. Marcus typed back 2 words. Tomorrow morning. Then he turned off his phone, looked at his wife, and said, "Pass the potatoes, please." The precinct buzzed with tension at 6:45 a.m. as Marcus stepped through the front doors. Officers stopped mid-conversation, eyes following him down the hallway. The overnight shift was ending, day's shift beginning, and everyone had seen the video. "Morning, Chief," voices murmured as he passed. Janet met him at his office door, tablet in hand. "Sir, your 7 a.m. is already here." "Brady's early." Marcus checked his watch. "Not Brady. Lieutenant Brady, his father. He's been here since 5. Marcus hung his coat. "Where's Officer Brady?" "Waiting in the conference room. Hasn't said a word since he arrived." "Good. Let him sit." Marcus loosened his tie slightly. "Show the lieutenant in." James Brady burst through the door before Janet could move. 25 years on the force had left him stocky and red-faced, his uniform straining at the buttons. "What the hell are you trying to pull, Thompson?" he demanded. Marcus sat calmly behind his desk. "Lieutenant Brady, shut the door. My boy's career." "Shut the door." The lieutenant slammed it shut, the blinds rattling. "Sit down," Marcus ordered. "I'll stand." "That wasn't a request, Lieutenant." Brady Sr. dropped into a chair, his face getting redder. "You're trying to make an example of my son. Your son made an example of himself." Marcus pulled up the body camera footage on his monitor. "Want to watch it together?" "He was doing his job." "Was he?" Marcus turned the screen. "Let's review." Timestamp 2013. No probable cause for the stop. 2015. Aggressive tone and posture. 2017. Racial profiling evident in word choice. "Should I continue?" "You can't prove. I don't have to prove it. Your son recorded it all himself." Marcus leaned forward. "Now, here's what's going to happen. In about 10 minutes, I'm meeting with your son to determine if he has a future in this department. Your next move will greatly influence that decision." The lieutenant's jaw clenched. "Is that a threat?" "No, it's a reality check. Your son learned his biases somewhere." "Lieutenant, I'm looking at the source right now." A knock at the door interrupted them. Janet poked her head in. "Sir, Officer Brady's attorney has arrived." Marcus checked his watch again. "Right on time. Send them in." The door opened wider, admitting a sharp-suited woman and Officer Brady, who looked like he hadn't slept. His father stood up. "Sit down, Lieutenant," Marcus said firmly. "You're not part of this meeting." "The hell I'm not. That's my son, and that's exactly the problem." Marcus pressed his intercom. "Janet, please escort Lieutenant Brady out. If he resists, call Internal Affairs." Brady Sr.'s face went from red to purple. He opened his mouth, then closed it, looking between his son and Marcus. "This isn't over, Thompson. You're right. It's just beginning, starting with your mandatory retraining schedule." Marcus held up a folder. "Your new assignments. Take them with you." The lieutenant snatched the folder and stormed out. Officer Brady watched him go, then sank into a chair, his attorney taking the seat beside him. "Chief Thompson," the attorney began, "before we start, my client, Ms. Chen," Marcus cut her off, recognizing the union's lawyer, "this isn't a disciplinary hearing." "Not yet. This is a conversation about Officer Brady's future, whether he wants one in law enforcement." Brady looked up, eyes red-rimmed. "Sir, I never meant." "Show me your notes," Marcus interrupted. "The ones I asked you to write about last night's stop." Brady pulled out several handwritten pages, hands trembling slightly. Marcus took them, scanning the tight, nervous handwriting. "Read it," he said, handing the pages back. "Out loud." "Sir." "Your own words, Brady. Read them." Brady cleared his throat, glancing at his attorney who nodded slightly. 2013 hours, observed black Audi A6 traveling on Maple Drive, he began. Vehicle occupant was a black male in business attire. I decided to." He stopped, swallowing hard. "Go on," Marcus said quietly. "Why did you decide to pull me over?" Brady's voice cracked. Because you looked out of place in that neighborhood. And what does out of place mean, Officer Brady? Silence filled the office. Even Ms. Chen shifted uncomfortably. A black man in an expensive car in a nice neighborhood, Brady finally whispered. I assumed. You assumed what? That it wasn't your car. That you must have. That something must be wrong. Marcus stood, walking to his window. Outside, protesters were already gathering, their signs visible from his third-floor view. Officer Brady, do you know why I became a cop? No, sir. Because when I was 16, an officer decided I looked out of place in my own neighborhood. He threw me against a wall, searched me, humiliated me in front of my friends. And I decided right then that I could either hate the system, or I could change it from within. He turned back to Brady. Which are you going to do? Brady looked confused. Sir, you have 3 choices right now. 1. You resign. Walk away. Find a new career. 2. You fight this. Claim you did nothing wrong. Let your father and the union back you up. Or 3. Marcus paused, letting the moment stretch. What's the third option? Brady asked. You admit your biases, confront them, and work to change. Not just yourself, but the system that created you. Ms. Chen leaned forward. Chief Thompson, are you offering some kind of deal? I'm offering an opportunity. 6 months supervised patrol, mandatory bias training, community service in minority neighborhoods. After that, if Officer Brady shows real change, he keeps his badge. And if I don't take this offer? Brady asked. Then we do this the hard way. Disciplinary hearing, public review, probable termination. And the next department that Googles your name will see that video first. Brady looked down at his hands. My dad isn't in this room, Marcus finished. This is your choice, not his. The office fell silent except for the muffled chants from the protesters outside. Brady picked up his statement again, reading further. After initiating the stop, I maintained an aggressive posture because I wanted to establish dominance over. His voice cracked again. God, seeing it written down like this. Keep reading, Marcus ordered. I chose words intended to provoke a response, to justify escalation if necessary. Brady put the papers down. I can't. You can. And you will. Every word. For the next hour, Brady read his statement. Every assumption, every prejudiced thought, every moment where bias influenced his actions. By the end, his voice was hoarse and his eyes were wet. Ms. Chen spoke up. Chief Thompson, about your offer. But Brady cut her off. I'll take it. The third option. I need to be better than this. Marcus nodded slowly. It won't be easy. A lot of people, including your father, won't understand. I know. You'll have to testify about this incident at diversity training sessions. Tell other officers what you learned. Yes, sir. Marcus pressed his intercom. Janet, send in Tommy. The door opened and Tommy entered, carrying his science project. Brady looked confused. Officer Brady, this is my son. He's going to teach you something about systemic bias. Pay attention. There will be a test. Tommy set up his display board, his young voice confident as he began. My project is about how systems learn to be biased. Marcus watched Brady's face as Tommy explained artificial intelligence, training data, and the perpetuation of prejudice. Watched understanding slowly dawn in the young officer's eyes. Outside, the protesters' chants grew louder. Marcus's phone buzzed with messages from the mayor, the commissioner, the media. But in his office, a 12-year-old boy was teaching a police officer about the very biases that had brought them all to this moment. And maybe, just maybe, something was beginning to change. After Tommy's presentation, Marcus dismissed everyone except Brady. The office fell into heavy silence as the door clicked shut behind them. Get up, Marcus said. Brady stood, uncertain. Sir, follow me. Marcus grabbed a laptop from his desk. We're going somewhere. They took the back stairs to avoid the media circus at the main entrance. Marcus's unmarked car waited in the secure garage, engine already running. Brady hesitated at the passenger door. Get in, Marcus ordered. The drive was silent for 15 minutes as they wound through the city streets. Brady stared out the window, watching the neighborhoods change, from downtown's glass towers to the aging suburbs where he patrolled. Marcus finally pulled into an empty school parking lot. The sign read Roosevelt High School, home of the Eagles. Sir, why are we quiet? Marcus opened the laptop. Watch. The body camera footage started playing. Brady flinched at the sound of his own voice. No, he said softly. Please, I've seen enough. You haven't seen anything yet. Marcus turned up the volume. Watch yourself. Listen to yourself. The footage played on. Brady's aggressive commands. Marcus's calm responses. The escalating tension. Look at my hands, Marcus said. Where are they the entire time? Visible, Brady whispered. On the steering wheel. And still you acted like I was a threat. Why? Brady's jaw worked, but no words came out. Why? Marcus demanded louder. Because you're black. Brady burst out. Because that's what I was taught. Because every suspect description, every training video, every warning about dangerous neighborhoods. He stopped, breathing hard. Keep going, Marcus pressed. Say it all. Because my father told me never to trust, to always assume. Brady's voice cracked. Oh God. Marcus let the silence stretch. On the laptop screen, the footage continued playing. This is my old high school, Marcus finally said. Class of 91. I was captain of the debate team, played varsity baseball. Had a scholarship to Georgetown lined up. Want to know what happened 2 weeks before graduation? Brady didn't respond, but Marcus continued. Officer pulled me over. Not unlike you did. Except he didn't stop at humiliation. Planted drugs in my car. Said a black kid with a scholarship must be dealing. Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Spent 3 nights in jail before they sorted it out. Almost lost everything. Sir, I would never. You already did. Marcus pointed to the screen. You just didn't get the chance to finish. Tell me, what would you have done if I hadn't been the chief? If I'd shown the slightest resistance? Brady's silence was answer enough. This is where it ends, Marcus said, gesturing at the school. Right here. Kids like my son, like I was, watching officers like you decide their futures based on nothing but skin color. He started the body cam footage again, this time focusing on the background. See those people recording? The neighbors watching? Every one of them has seen this before. Been through this before. Now they are watching their chief of police go through it. Brady's voice was barely audible. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough. Marcus turned to face him fully. I need to know if you understand. Really understand. Because if you don't, that badge isn't coming back. I understand that I was wrong. No. Understanding that you were wrong is easy. Understanding why you were wrong, that's the hard part. Marcus pointed to the school again. Next week, you're going to start teaching there. Teaching. 3 days a week, after your shift. They have a program for at-risk youth. You're going to tell them your story. Show them this footage. Help them understand what bias looks like from both sides. Brady swallowed hard. The kids won't trust me. No, they won't. You'll have to earn it. Just like you have to earn back your badge. Marcus pulled out his phone, scrolled through several messages. Your father's been busy. Called the commissioner, the union president, even the mayor. Trying to make this go away. I don't want it to go away, Brady said quietly. Good. Because it can't. That video has 2 million views now. You're the face of police bias whether you like it or not. The question is, are you going to be an example of what's wrong with the system, or how it can change? Brady watched the footage loop again, saw himself through new eyes. How do I fix this? You don't. Not alone. Marcus closed the laptop. But you start by facing it. All of it. The history, the culture, the assumptions you never questioned. Starting with him. Brady tensed. My father. Is part of the problem. A big part. And until you're ready to stand up to him, to reject everything he taught you about who to fear and why, you're not ready to wear the badge. Is my father, Brady whispered. And I'm your chief. Marcus's voice was firm. More importantly, I'm a black man who spent his entire career fighting people who think like your father. People who taught their sons to think the same way. The cycle ends with you, Brady. Right here. Right now. Brady's hands clenched in his lap. He'll never understand. That's his problem. The question is, do you understand? Silence filled the car. In the distance, students were starting to arrive for morning practice, their laughter carrying across the empty parking lot. I understand, Brady finally said, his voice stronger. I understand that I've been wrong. That I've hurt people. That everything I thought I knew about being a good cop was garbage. Marcus nodded slowly. Keep going. I understand that saying sorry isn't enough. That I have to change, really change. And that means... Brady took a deep breath. That means standing up to my father. Rejecting everything he taught me about race, about power, about what it means to be a cop. And I understand that I'm part of a bigger problem. That my actions, my biases, they don't just hurt individuals. They hurt communities. They destroy trust. They make it harder for good cops to do their jobs. Marcus started the car. Tomorrow morning, 0800 hours. You're going to call a press conference. What? You're going to stand up in front of the cameras, play your body cam footage, and tell the truth. All of it. About your biases, your father's influence, everything. Brady's face went pale. They'll crucify me. Probably. But it's the only way forward. The only way to show that you're really ready to change. Marcus pulled out of the parking lot. The question is, are you brave enough to face the truth publicly, or just privately in my car? The drive back to the station was silent. Brady stared out the window again. But this time he was seeing the city differently. Seeing the people differently. Seeing himself differently. As they pulled into the garage, Marcus spoke one last time. Decision time, Brady. Press conference tomorrow, full public accountability, or resignation letter on my desk by noon. Your choice. Brady straightened his shoulders. I'll do the press conference, sir. Good. Marcus shut off the engine. Because change doesn't happen in private. It happens in the light, where everyone can see it. Even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. The precinct's press room was packed. Camera lights blazed as Brady stepped up to the podium, his body cam footage frozen on the screen behind him. Marcus stood off to the side, arms crossed, watching. Brady gripped the podium edges. My name is Officer Michael Brady. 3 days ago, I conducted a traffic stop that exposed my racial bias and brought shame to this department. His voice shook slightly as he pressed play on the footage. The room fell silent except for the audio from that night. That's my voice you hear, Brady continued as the video played. Those are my words, my actions, my prejudice on display. In the back of the room, Lieutenant Brady stood rigid, face dark with anger. Next to him, Sarah Thompson watched thoughtfully, her hand on Tommy's shoulder. I was wrong, Brady said firmly. Not just in my actions that night, but in my entire approach to policing. I'd carried biases I didn't want to acknowledge. Biases I inherited. Biases I'm now committed to confronting and changing. A reporter's hand shot up. Officer Brady, are you saying your father, Lieutenant Brady, taught you to profile minority drivers? Brady's eyes met his father's. The older man's jaw clenched. Yes, Brady answered. That's exactly what I'm saying. The room erupted. Cameras swung between Brady and his father. The lieutenant stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Officer Brady, another reporter stood. Is this statement voluntary, or part of a deal to keep your job? Both, Brady replied honestly. Chief Thompson offered me a choice. Resign, deny everything, or face the truth and work to change. I chose the truth. The questions came rapid fire. Will you resign? Are you worried about retaliation? What does your father say about this? Brady held up a hand. I'm not resigning. I'm committing to change. Starting today, I begin intensive bias training. I'll be working with community youth programs and yes, this means publicly rejecting the prejudiced beliefs I was raised with. Marcus stepped forward. Officer Brady will be documenting his retraining process. Full transparency. The department will release weekly progress reports. Chief Thompson, a reporter called out. Why give him a second chance? Because change has to start somewhere, Marcus replied. And sometimes, the best teachers are the ones who've learned from their mistakes. The press conference ended, but Brady's day was just beginning. Marcus led him to the training room where 20 other officers waited. Your first bias training session, Marcus announced. These officers volunteered to go through it with you. Brady scanned the faces. All white officers, all looking uncomfortable. Sir, one spoke up. Are we here because we're biased too? You're here because every officer needs this training. Brady's just the first to admit it publicly. Marcus headed for the door. I'll be back in 4 hours. Don't hold back. The training was brutal. They watched Brady's body cam footage again, this time with a facilitator stopping at every questionable word, every aggressive movement, every assumption. Officer Brady, the facilitator asked, why did you immediately rest your hand on your weapons? Because Brady stopped, really thinking about it. Because I automatically saw him as a threat. Based on his race, Brady admitted. Just his race. The discussion continued, raw and honest. Other officers began sharing their own moments of bias, their own assumptions. By lunch, the room felt heavy with recognition. Marcus returned as they were breaking for lunch. Brady, grab your gear. You're due at Roosevelt High. The school hallways were quiet when they arrived, classes in session. Principal Chen met them outside the counseling office. The students are skeptical, she warned. These kids have had bad experiences with police. Good, Marcus replied. Brady needs to hear their stories. The classroom held 15 teenagers, all black or Hispanic. They stared at Brady with open hostility. This the racist cop from the video? One boy asked. Brady swallowed hard. Yes, I am. Why you here? Gonna profile us too? No, Brady said quietly. I'm here to learn. To listen. To change. A girl in the back scoffed. Police don't change. Sometimes they do, Marcus spoke up. Sometimes they have to. For the next 2 hours, Brady listened. The students told their stories, traffic stops, stop and frisks, harassment. Each story hit him like a physical blow, making him see his own actions in a new light. My brother got arrested last year, one student said. Cop said he fit a description. Only description was young black male. That was you? Wasn't it? Brady nodded, shame burning his throat. Yes, that was my call. He lost his job because of you. Couldn't make bail. I'm sorry, Brady whispered. Sorry don't fix it, the student snapped. No, Brady agreed. It doesn't. But maybe this will help. He pulled out his notebook. What's your brother's name? I'll testify about my bias policing. Help him clear his record. The room fell silent. You do that? The student asked skeptically. Yes. For anyone I've wronged through my prejudice. It's part of making this right. After class, Marcus drove them back to the station. How do you feel? Sick, Brady admitted. Every story they told, that could have been you, could have been your son. It was me. Many times. Marcus pulled into his parking spot. Ready for part 3. There's more. Evening patrol. Minority neighborhood. You're going to observe only. Watch how Officer Martinez handles community interactions. Brady's shoulders slumped. How long does this training last? Until it takes. Until you prove you've changed. Marcus checked his phone. Your father's called 6 times. Left messages saying you betrayed the family. Betrayed the badge. He's wrong, Brady said firmly, surprising himself with his conviction. Yes, he is. But standing up to family beliefs is the hardest part of change. Marcus got out of the car. The real test isn't in that classroom or at that school. It's in what you do next time you're alone on patrol, making split-second decisions. They met Martinez in the briefing room. She barely acknowledged Brady. Remember, Marcus told her, his observing only. Walk him through your community policing approach. The next 6 hours opened Brady's eyes even further. He watched Martinez chat with kids playing basketball, help an elderly woman with groceries, diffuse a domestic dispute through conversation rather than force. Notice anything? She asked as they patrolled. You know everyone's names, Brady replied. Hard to fear people when you know their stories. She turned down a dark street. Hard to profile them when you see them as individuals. A call came in, suspicious person in a parked car. Watch and learn, Martinez said. The car was running, a black man in the driver's seat. Martinez approached with a smile, flashlight beam kept low. Evening, sir. Everything okay? The man looked exhausted. Battery's dead. Been waiting for my brother to bring cables. Need a jump? Martinez offered. Got cables in the trunk. 10 minutes later, they had the man's car running. He thanked them profusely. That's all it takes, Martinez told Brady as they drove away. Approach with respect. Assume the best. Offer help instead of suspicion. Back at the station, Marcus was waiting. Report, Officer Brady. Brady stood straight. I've learned more today than in 2 years of policing, sir. And I've got a lot more to learn. Good answer. Tomorrow you do it all again. And the next day. And the next. Yes, sir. Brady paused. My father left another message. Says is disowning me. Marcus nodded. Price of change. Question is it worth it? Brady thought about the students' stories, Martinez's approach, his own bias caught on camera. Yes, sir. It is. Then get some rest. Because tomorrow's going to be even harder. 2 weeks into his retraining, Brady sat in his apartment staring at his phone. 15 missed calls from his father. 38 unread texts from family members. 1 new email from his mother. Please stop this nonsense. A knock at his door made him jump. He wasn't expecting anyone at 9 p.m. Through the peephole, he saw his father. Open up, Michael. The lieutenant's voice carried through the door. We need to talk. Brady's hand hovered over the doorknob. 2 weeks ago, he would have opened it without hesitation. Now, I can hear you in there. Another pound on the door. Don't make me use my key. Brady slid the chain lock into place. That key's not good anymore. Changed the locks last week. Damn it, Michael. I'm your father. Yes, you are. Brady leaned against the door. And everything I'm unlearning, I learned from you. Silence from the hallway. Then, they brainwashed you. No, Dad. They've opened my eyes. Brady straightened up. I've got bias training in the morning. I need to sleep. This isn't over. Yes, it is. Brady listened to his father's heavy footsteps fade away. His phone buzzed, a text from Marcus. Ready for tomorrow? Tomorrow. Brady's first real test. He'd be back on patrol, alone, but with every stop recorded and reviewed. Every interaction scrutinized. Ready, he texted back. Morning came too quickly. Brady walked into roll call to mixed reactions. Some officers nodded in support. Others turned away. The divide in the department was clear. Marcus stood at the front. Officer Brady, your body camera has been upgraded. Live streaming to my office. Every stop, every interaction will be monitored. Yes, sir. Your sector today is your old patrol route. Brady tensed. The same area where he'd stopped Marcus. Problem? Marcus asked. No, sir. Just aware of the significance. Marcus handed him his gear. Remember your training. Remember those kids' stories. Remember why you're doing this. The morning started quietly. Traffic stops for actual violations. Each interaction professional, respectful. Brady kept his hands visible, his voice calm, his assumptions in check. Then the call came. Suspicious person in a vehicle. Brady's heart rate spiked as he pulled up. Black male in a luxury car, parked in an upscale neighborhood. 2 weeks ago, he would have approached with his hand on his weapon, authority in his voice. Now, he parked at an angle to protect the vehicle from traffic, activated his body camera, and approached with a smile. Good morning, sir. I'm Officer Brady. Just checking to make sure everything's okay. The man looked up from his phone. Everything's fine, officer. Just waiting for my daughter. She's at a piano lesson. He gestured to the house behind them. Would you like me to wait with you until she comes out? This street's had some break-ins lately. The man's surprised expression said everything about his previous experiences with police. Thank you, officer. That's very kind. They chatted until a young girl bounded out of the house, violin case in hand. Brady waved goodbye, feeling something he hadn't felt in years on patrol, connection. Back at the station for lunch, Marcus called him in. Watched your stops this morning, the chief said. Especially that last one. Did I handle it okay? You handled it like a peace officer, not an occupying force. Marcus smiled slightly. Progress. A commotion outside interrupted them. Brady recognized his father's voice. Where is he? Where's my son? Marcus sighed. Ready to deal with this? Brady squared his shoulders. Yes, sir. Lieutenant Brady burst in, face red. There you are. Your mother's crying. Your sisters won't speak to me. The whole family's falling apart because of your grandstanding. No, Brady said firmly. The family's falling apart because I'm breaking the cycle of bias you created. Bias? I taught you how to be a good cop. You taught me to be afraid. Brady stepped forward. Taught me to see threats where there weren't any. Taught me to judge people by their skin color, their neighborhood, their car. I taught you to stay alive. You taught me to make other people fear for their lives. Brady gestured to Marcus. Ask the chief what that feels like. Ask his son what it's like to grow up knowing the police see you as a threat. The lieutenant turned to Marcus. This is your doing. You've turned my son against me. No, Marcus replied calmly. Your son turned toward the truth. That's different. Truth? You want truth? The lieutenant yanked off his badge. Here's truth. I quit. Won't serve under a chief who coddles criminals and punishes good cops. Brady felt a weight lift from his shoulders. That's your choice, Dad. Like this was mine. You're no son of mine. Because I want to be a better cop than you taught me to be. Because I want to serve everyone in our community, not just the ones who look like us. His father stormed out. Brady turned to Marcus. I just lost my family. No, Marcus said quietly. You just found your integrity. The afternoon patrol was harder. Every car he passed, every person he saw, Brady had to consciously check his ingrained reactions. The voice in his head still sounded like his father's, but now he recognized it for what it was, fear disguised as authority. A call came in, suspicious persons, group of black teens in the park. Brady responded, lights off, and parked at a distance to observe first. The suspicious persons were playing basketball. He got out, grabbed a ball from his trunk, part of his new community engagement kit, and walked over. Room for one more. The teens tensed until they recognized him. Hey, you're that cop from the video, one said. The one who's trying to change. Trying, Brady agreed. Still learning, still making mistakes, but trying. They let him play. He was terrible. They laughed with him, not at him. When another patrol car rolled by, lights flashing, Brady waved them off. Not suspicious, he radioed. Community engagement in progress. Getting schooled in basketball. That evening, Brady sat in Marcus's office for his daily review. Your stops are improving, Marcus said. Your interactions are more human. But, you're still hesitating. Still fighting your instincts. Brady nodded. Every stop, every interaction, I hear my father's voice. All those years of us versus them training. That voice will fade, Marcus assured him. Replace it with the voices of those kids at Roosevelt High. The people you're learning to serve, not suspect. Brady's phone buzzed, another family member cutting ties. He turned it off. Was it worth it? He asked. Losing everything. You haven't lost everything, Marcus corrected. You've gained perspective, gained respect, gained the chance to be part of real change. Brady looked out the window at the setting sun. Think I'll ever be able to patrol without the live camera monitoring? When you prove that your changes are genuine. When your first instinct is to help, not control. Marcus stood. When you can look at any person, in any car, in any neighborhood, and see a citizen to serve, not a threat to confront. How long? As long as it takes. Marcus checked his watch. You've got evening bias training in 10 minutes. Then tomorrow, we do it all again. Brady nodded, standing to leave. Brady, Marcus called after him. What you did today, standing up to your father. That took courage. Learned that from you, sir. Standing up to him, standing up to the system, standing up to my own biases. Brady paused at the door. Even if it cost me my family, I won't go back to being that officer in the video. Good, Marcus said. Because that officer doesn't exist anymore. You're becoming someone new. 3 months after the traffic stop that changed everything, Brady sat in his patrol car, watching the sun rise over his sector. His body camera was still recording every moment, but the live monitoring had stopped last week, Marcus's first show of renewed trust. The radio crackled. Possible suspicious vehicle, black SUV, Maple Drive. Brady's chest tightened. The same street where he'd stopped Marcus. Unit 47 responding, he said into his radio. Any specific suspicious activity reported? Negative. Caller just said vehicle looks out of place. 3 months ago, that would have been enough for Brady. Now he asked, has the vehicle violated any traffic laws? Negative. Has the caller reported any criminal activity? Negative. Just says it doesn't belong in the neighborhood. Brady took a deep breath. Copy that. Responding to observe only. No stop without probable cause. He drove slowly down Maple Drive, scanning for the reported vehicle. There it was, a black Range Rover, parked legally. A black woman in business attire stood beside it, checking her phone. Brady parked at a distance and observed. The woman was clearly waiting for something, occasionally looking at the house in front of her. The front door opened. A teenage girl came out, backpack in hand. The woman waved. Unit 47 to dispatch, Brady said. No suspicious activity. Parent picking up child. Disregard call. He was about to leave when he noticed another patrol car pulling up fast, lights flashing. The driver's door opened, and Brady's stomach dropped. Officer Wilson, his old partner, his father's protege. Brady quickly turned his car around. Wilson was already out, hand near his weapon. Police! Step away from the vehicle. Brady hit his lights and siren for one quick burst, announcing his presence. He parked and stepped out. I've got this, Wilson, he called out. Already investigated. Nothing suspicious. Wilson didn't back down. Got a call about a suspicious vehicle. Parent picking up her kid, Brady said firmly, positioning himself between Wilson and the woman. No probable cause for a stop. The woman had pulled her daughter close, both watching the scene unfold with familiar fear in their eyes. Since when do you ignore suspicious vehicle calls? Wilson demanded. Since I learned the difference between suspicious activity and suspicious assumptions. Brady turned to the woman. I apologize for my colleague's behavior. You're free to go. Wilson grabbed Brady's arm. What the hell happened to you? Brady removed Wilson's hand. I learned to be a better cop. You should try it. His body camera caught everything. Wilson's aggressive stance, the family's fear, his own measured response. 3 months ago, he would have been the one with his hand on his weapon. Making us look weak, Wilson spat. No, Brady replied. Making us look like what we're supposed to be, public servants. The woman had quickly loaded her daughter into the car. Brady walked over, keeping his hands visible. I'm sorry about this, he said through her partially opened window. Would you like me to follow you out of the neighborhood? Ensure you're not stopped again. She studied his face. You're that officer, aren't you? The one from the video who's been working with Chief Thompson. Yes. Then yes, please. I'd appreciate the escort. Brady followed them to the main road, then radioed in. Unit 47. Be advised, Black Range Rover is a parent and student leaving approved pickup location. Any further calls about this vehicle should be disregarded. Back at the station, Marcus was waiting. So your body cam footage from this morning, he said. Real-time upload still works, even without monitoring. Did I handle it okay? You handled it like a peace officer. De-escalated Wilson, protected the citizens, documented everything. Marcus smiled slightly. Might make a decent cop out of you yet. Brady sat heavily in a chair. Wilson reminds me of how I used to be, following my father's playbook. Speaking of your father, filed his retirement papers yesterday. Couldn't handle the changes in the department. Marcus nodded. Change is hardest for those who've invested the most in the old way of thinking. You're lucky you learned younger. Doesn't feel lucky. Lost my family, most of my friends on the force, but gained something more important. Marcus handed him a folder. Your final evaluation. Review board recommends full reinstatement. No more monitoring. Brady opened the folder. The words blurred as he read. Officer Brady has demonstrated genuine transformation, commitment to unbiased policing, exemplary community engagement. The kids at Roosevelt High wrote letters of support, Marcus added. So did some of your traffic stops from the past month. Even got one from that woman you helped with the jumpstart. What happens now? Now you keep doing the work. Keep checking your biases. Keep showing others it's possible to change. Marcus leaned forward. Because next week, you start teaching at the academy. Brady looked up sharply. What? New mandatory course on bias recognition and community policing. Who better to teach it than someone who's lived both sides? The cadets won't want to hear it. No, they won't. Just like you didn't. But they need to. Marcus stood. Your father's generation is retiring. Their way of policing is ending. You're proof that change is possible, even for those raised in the old system. Brady's phone buzzed. A text from his sister, the first family contact in months. So your interview on the news. Dad's furious. Mom's starting to ask questions. Maybe you're right. It's starting to spread, he told Marcus. The change. The questions. Even in my family. That's how it happens. One officer, one family, one traffic stop at a time. Marcus checked his watch. Speaking of which, you've got patrol in 10 minutes. Brady stood, straightening his uniform. Any final advice? Remember where you started. Remember why you changed. And remember that every interaction is a chance to prove that police can be better than our biases. Out on patrol, Brady drove past the spot where he'd stopped Marcus 3 months ago. The memory of that night still stung, but now it drove him forward instead of holding him back. His radio crackled. Suspicious person call, black male in business attire. Brady keyed his radio. Unit 47 responding. Please have caller specify suspicious activity, not just suspicious appearance. The dispatcher paused. Then, caller just says he doesn't belong. Copy that. Responding to observe only. No stop without probable cause. Brady smiled slightly. In dispatch? Update the call classification. This isn't suspicious activity. This is bias reporting. He drove toward the call, body camera recording, remembering Marcus's words from that first night. Change happens one traffic stop at a time. One officer at a time. One choice at a time. Brady made his choice. Every day, every stop, every interaction. He chose to be better than his training, better than his biases, better than the officer who'd once pulled over his chief. The sun was setting as he arrived on scene, painting the sky in the same colors as that fateful night. But this time, he was a different officer. This time, he would get it right.